Let's talk about standard error and standard output in Python. When we call Python's print function, Python will write to standard output. Standard output is a file-like object, also known as a file stream. The standard output file-like object is represented by the stdout object in Python's sys module. If we look at the documentation for Python's print function, we'll see that by default, print writes to sys.stdout. If we call the write method on sys.stdout, text will write to the terminal screen. Standard output is actually one of two file streams that display text to the screen. The other file stream is called standard error. We can write to standard error by writing to sys.stderr, or we can specify the file argument when calling print to standard error instead of printing to standard output. Why are there two writable output streams? Well, sometimes it's useful to distinguish between the normal output of a program and output that describes something abnormal or additional, like an error. Here's an example program that prints to both standard error and standard output. When we run this program, it will print the number of lines within each given file to standard output. But if any files can't be read, it'll print those errors to standard error. If we pipe the output of this program to a file, by default, only the standard output stream would be piped to that file. We can see that our error message still displays on our screen. It's possible to pipe standard error instead by piping output stream 2 instead of the default output stream, which is stream 1. So here we have our standard error in the file, and our output still shows up on the screen. Or we could merge both standard output and standard error together to pipe them both to the file at the same time. Note that the piping that I'm doing here is dependent upon your operating system and the terminal you're running in, so these greater than signs that I'm using may be different on your machine. Now, the advantage of having two output streams is that you can redirect the output streams separately. That redirection isn't always related to errors though. For example, if we launch the Python REPL and we pipe standard error to a file, we'll see that the introductory message that's usually printed out is actually printed to standard error, not to standard output. But those three greater than signs are printed to standard output. Standard error is often used for printing messages related to errors, but it's also used for diagnostic output or for pretty much any output that shouldn't be mixed together with the main program output. Python typically prints unhandled exceptions and warning messages to standard error. For example, when Python prints a traceback due to an unhandled error, it'll print that traceback message to standard error. And when Python's warning module is used to issue warnings, those warning messages will also print to standard error. If you call Python's sys.exit function, the error message that prints out just before Python exits also prints out to standard error. And Python's argparse module also prints its warning and error messages to standard error. So this is being printed out to standard error. So even if you don't print to standard error much yourself, it's probably used quite often by Python libraries that you rely on. When you print to the terminal in Python, by default your output goes to standard output. Whenever you print an error, a warning, some diagnostic output, or pretty much any output that shouldn't be mixed in with the regular output of your program, you should probably print to standard error instead of printing to standard output.